to you the podcast Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches. We discuss a range of topics that include addictions, religious abuse, and recovery. This live platform offers meaningful questions and answers, a counseling continuum, and valuable feedback from professionals and others who have been through the process and are healed, forgiven, and reconciled. If they can achieve this, so can you. This program can be heard on iHeart, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Pandora, Apple Podcasts, and others. Make no mistake, this podcast sustains and implements three things: healing, forgiveness, and reconciliation within the Church of God. Thanks for listening.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight on Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches. I know you usually see Pastor Moon's face, but today it's me, Tennille McLeod. I'll be your host for just hopefully a few minutes. Pastor Prince is having a little bit of difficulty with his technical challenges right now. But as soon as we can, we'll let him on. As a matter of fact, I think we may have him on. Hold on. Let's see. There he is. Wonderful.
Yes.
Wonderful. Awesome.
Good to be here. We had some difficulties and we still are, but we're going to go on as best we can. To our viewers, good to have you here. And again, this is the podcast, Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches. Good to have Steve, our guest here tonight, and happy to have him here, friends. Just glad to have him here. He's got a background in this type of program. I want to read a little bit about what it's all about. He's director of Hurt to Hope program, and that program helps to overcome painful experiences, transformations, and inspires people's lives and restores and gives them strength. Steve's a husband, a father of three, and the author of the book River of Hope. Tell us about that book, please, Steve.
It's so great to be with you both this evening. Glad you got past your difficulties technically there, and you're with us this evening for sure.
Yeah.
So the book Rivers of Hope really started several years ago, 2011 to be specifically. I gave you guys a little bit last week when I told you that God blessed us with three children all at one time. And I started documenting some of that 5-year journey, and I had an outline for the book. And then life happened. Raising those three kids became a reality, and all that goes with that, and going into the full-time ministry. And it really, just to be honest with you, life happened, and then probably some insecurities on my part. And I had a coach that would nudge me once in a while. Hey, Steve, what about that book? And I would joke with him. I'd say, look, we need to stop joking like that. I'm not paying you to coach me about that book. And he did that. He did that one day, and I got off the phone with him, and I said, you know what? I'm going to write this book. And I wrote the book in 2 weeks. Now, I wrote the book in 2 weeks.
Wow.
But I had a lot to learn about editing and publishing and all that.
Publishing, yeah. Distributing, oh yeah, yeah.
But
well,
the book,
it's go on, please. Please go ahead.
The book is a public thank you to God for the mountains that He's moved in my life. I didn't write it for sales. I didn't write it, I mean, if it does well, great. But I really wrote it just to tell people that God is faithful. And this is what He's done in my life, and you have hope too.
Very good. A book of encouragement. Well, it's good to be here, friends, again, Wounded Hearts, and we're just happy to have you here. And I'm here only by the grace of God. My computer just crashed 5-6 times a day, but I'm glad I'm here.
Me too.
The views expressed on the podcast many times I don't agree with the staff, but we want to discuss these things to inspire unity, forgiveness within God's church. But make no mistake, we're here because 3 reasons: for healing, reconciliation, and forgiveness. Podcasts are exciting. There's 300 30 million people listened in the past 7 days to podcast. And we can be heard here on Amazon, Google, Buzzsprout, Poddash, Podchaser, Pandora Review, Apple Face, SoundCloud, True Social, Facebook, YouTube, and Alexa. So again, glad to have that expansion for the program. And we're glad to have Steve here again. Steve, your numbers were just over the roof last week. Had a lot of comments, a lot of questions. So friends, today, now is the time to get your question in. You can text in 1-866-538-3664. That text number again is 1-866-538-3664 for Steve tonight. You can call our Wounded Hearts telephone line, and that's 478-283-9093, 478-283-9093. We have a Wounded Hearts email. You can email us. It's REEECHONE@AOL.com. Again, Wounded Hearts email is REEECHONE@AOL.com. All right, Steve, are you ready tonight?
Yes, sir.
We got some questions for you. Steve, could you please again show us that situation with the water? We've got about 7 platforms that are video, audio only. So while you're doing, explain to us what you're doing, please.
Sure. The glass represents our hearts. The bottled water that I have this evening represents life's pains and challenges. And so Jesus said that we would have trouble. And sometimes we believe him, sometimes we don't. But I think I demonstrated last week, and I'll be glad to again this week, that for me, my parents divorced when I was 2-year-old. Significant event for a 2-year-old, right?
Oh, yes. Very much, very much.
Dad did not show up consistently for his visitations after the divorce. Grateful for the times he did, but those times he didn't, and he didn't call and he didn't show up, and I'm sitting out on the steps of Mom's apartment not knowing what's going to happen. A lot of pain in the heart.
Sure.
And let me say this too. I'm just giving you my situation. Your audience, they all have their own pain and their own stories to tell. I just hope this is relatable.
It is.
Got into some fights in elementary school and middle school. Was bullied a little bit. Lost a grandfather. I mean, I'm probably at this point, if you can see the glass, I think you can. Sure. I'm 11, 12, and I'm over 3/4 full of pain. And then I fast forward a few years. I'm 16 years old. I'm going to be on the varsity team, on the cross country team that just went to state the year before. I was an alternate. So great promising prospect there. Had my first real girlfriend, I guess I should say. Got my driver's license. I mean, looking like a great junior year in high school. And then I got the devastating news that we were moving from Missouri to the state of Tennessee.
Wow.
And I didn't know anything about Tennessee. Tennessee has become home. I've lived here 30 of my 54 years. I love it, but at 16, I knew nothing about it. And based on all the things I just told you, I was hating the prospects of that move. And I got into more fights and more trouble in Tennessee. Well, you can look at my glass. I'm 16 years old, and I don't have anywhere else there's nothing else to pour. But how do I reconcile that with what Jesus said? It's not going to stop. Life's not going to stop coming at me just because I'm miserable.
Right.
So the next time an event, small or big, I might add, happens and more pain gets in my heart, it's going to get all over me and all over everybody close to me. And I'm going to be, needless to say, very difficult to live with because I haven't learned yet how to process in a healthy manner that pain in my heart.
Wow. That question connects with my next one. So how does a person process what's in the glass? I can't imagine having a dad not there. And I'm sure your mom had some issues of loneliness or financial issues, and you saw that. So how does one manage that pain that's in that glass?
I think we tend not to, Pastor. I think that's
Okay.
the challenge.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's everybody. Certainly there's folks that go to counseling. There's folks that have a small community of support. There's prayer. There's reading the Bible. All those things help for sure. But I think if we're being honest, most people, and I think this is a generalization, it's not for everybody, but I think men in particular tend to stuff their emotions. They isolate because we've been taught at a young age, it'll be okay. You know, don't cry. Pick yourself up by the bootstraps. You got to move on.
Very true.
And so all those subliminal messages get in there, like we're not being a man if we don't deal with this pain.
Right. Steve, my next question is, do women and men deal differently with pain? But before we do, I want to go to a quick commercial. And before that, a quick announcement, friends. Next week, the podcast, we're going to have a deep dive in the Church of God restoration. An author is coming on about the book that he wrote about that. So stay with us. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the broadcast. Be right back.
Greetings. Wounded Hearts, Wounded Churches is a weekly podcast reaching out to the disenfranchised, disconnected, or wounded. Remember, you are not forgotten. You went through a debilitating situation. As a result, we are reaching out to you in love with forgiveness, reconciliation, and healing. We also offer an exciting magazine called Arise. It's an excellent fit for class discussions or personal devotions. Arise can be purchased through our website or by calling 478-784-7600. This podcast was designed by Church of God for Church of God. Don't go away. Stay tuned for more exciting conversations. Thanks for listening.
Steve, do men and women handle pain differently?
Well, I think we're all human, so we all feel the same things: sadness, loneliness, anger, gladness, joy. I think in general, and this sounds like I'm repeating what I said, and I am to an extent. I think in general, women have a better support system. Certainly not all, but women are more prone to be vulnerable about what they are feeling, and that's healthy. Being vulnerable is a healthy place to be. Getting it out in the open, having other people pray for you, having other people give you encouragement. Of course, we have to be careful to surround ourselves with the right circle of friends that'll do just that. But women, to me, typically foster those relationships more organically than men do. Men have to, it's there for men. One another relationships is all throughout the Bible, all throughout the scriptures. I think men have to work at it a little harder.
Agreed. Any questions from our listeners? Friends, now's the time to email in. You can text in. You can text in 1-866-538-3664. 1-866-538-3664. Brother Steve, why is it hard for people to forgive? In my counseling before I retired, that was the main issue. Why is it so difficult for people to forgive?
I was mentioning this to my congregation on Sunday. I think one of the primary reasons is God has the ability to forget. God not only forgives, but he forgets our offenses, and we don't have that ability. We forgive, and that's hard enough for us, right? But to forget it, we don't have that capability. And so I think what we do is we draw a line in the sand, and we say in our hearts, I will never, ever forgive this person. This offense was, we don't think it through all the way, but in our hearts, we are saying this offense can never be forgiven. And I think when we look at Matthew 18, the parable of the unmerciful servant, that's a great place for us to say, you know what? My offenses to God put Jesus on the cross in my place.
Yes.
And so whatever's been done to me, and I'm not taking away it, whatever it was horrific, but it still is forgivable. And I always say there's a huge difference in drawing that line in the sand and saying, I will never, ever forgive. And then you contrast that with a heart that says, gosh, God, this is hard. This is impossible on my own. I don't know how to forgive, but I see in your word, I'm commanded to, I need to, but you're going to have to help me get there. You see the difference in the heart. If you've got that second,
right,
God will get you where you're wanting to go. He'll get you there every time if you have that full heart.
Do you any examples from your program that people got the healing that they needed? They were able to get the healing that they needed?
I'd love to share one in particular.
Okay.
Gentleman a few years ago, about my age, he had been through some horrific things with his father, and he was a brother in the church that I was serving at the time, and we would go have coffee a couple times a month, and he would tell me these horrific stories of, obviously I'm not going to share too much, but he would tell me horrific stories of verbal abuse, physical abuse, and sexual abuse, even to the point of contracted an STD through the sexual abuse. And that same thing I described, this is unforgivable. I will never forgive him, even though he'd been deceased for a few years. And I wanted to be really prayerful of listening to him well and not offering too much advice. And then it was difficult because I knew also I was his pastor and I needed to eventually call him to forgive, but I didn't want to do that right out the gate. So I just listened. There was a lot to process there. And eventually my wife and I offered the Hurt to Hope program in our home for a few sessions over the course of about 18 months. And this brother came to our home, and there was, 7 or 8 people going through it with him at the time. And I remember him sitting in the chair with his arms folded as we began the session, and just like anybody would be, cynical, questioning, is this going to work? And so anyway, we kept praying, and after the program was over, this was like 2-3 weeks later, we were going out to coffee, and I said, brother, how's it going with your heart? How you're feeling towards your father? And he said, oh, you talking about forgiving my dad? I did that back at your house. I was freed back at your house.
Mm.
Wow.
Free, yeah.
Wow. How he moved his heart.
Wow. Beautiful.
Steve, a couple of things there. Number one, I commend him for coming to get help.
And that's true.
And not just stuffing it, but saying, look, I need help, coming there, being available to get what he needed. So I commend him for that. Number two, I keep on hearing this word about freedom and forgiveness. Expand on that. Is there a freedom in forgiveness?
I like to say that unforgiveness is like taking a spoonful of poison every single day and expecting the other person to die. We're held in bondage. Think about the situations in your own life where you've not forgiven somebody. There's a heaviness when they walk into the room. You feel your blood pressure start to go up. There's a heaviness. You want to talk badly about them. I think that's what you're referring to when you forgive. All that's gone. It's so freeing and clear and purifying, and a peace that surpasses understanding comes with that. That's what I love about it.
Amen.
Steve, if you've been hurt, especially in the church or in the home, and you're forgiven that person, but are you still tender in some areas, or is it just across the board, no tenderness at all? That area has been dealt with, or is there wiggle room in there? How do you define that?
Elaborate a little bit on what you mean exactly by tenderness.
Okay. A friend of mine in his youth, he got cut with a bottle, and the situation healed, but that area is still tender. So if we get hurt and there's still a tenderness there, does that mean we have not forgiven or we have forgiven?
I think in general,
that's a tough question. That's a tough question.
Yeah, that is. It is a tough one.
It's a great question. I love the question. I think let's take it more specific. if someone specifically has done something or said something that's caused me pain, and I've had to wrestle with God, and there's a nugget in there I'd like to share with you, time permitting, but I want to answer your question first.
Sure.
I think that there is tenderness, and the tenderness is there for a couple of reasons, because remember, we can't forget. And also, trust has been broken, and trust takes a while to build back up. And depending on the severity of the situation, forgiveness is a must, no matter what. However, reconciliation takes two. Remember, Paul said, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. The other person may not want it. And depending on the severity, you may not put yourself back in a situation if there was abuse involved. Certainly you wouldn't do that, or if your children in extreme situations like that. So am I answering your questions? There's certainly tenderness.
Right, because I think that trust issue can be where the tenderness comes in, because you're not sure about trusting them. That makes sense. Steve, any comments you want to give the listeners in our last moments? And again, friends, we only have a couple minutes left. You want to go ahead and text in 1-866-538-3664. 1-866-538-3664. Anything on your? Yes, ma'am.
I just want to interject, because Denise Rawls did ask a very good question. She asks, when you forgive, how can you trust again?
Good question. Mm-hmm.
With God, all things are possible. I think about those that are parents that have children that have broken your trust, broken your heart, lied to you, stolen something, were deceitful with you. I know when that happens with our kids, we always tell them we forgive you. We're going to have to work on the trust. We're going to have to give you some situations to put yourself in to restore the trust from the ground level again. So be patient with yourself. Keep going to God in prayer about it. And remember, it's a process, and trust is going to take time. And it's going to take both of you, and it's going to take a process and time to get there. It won't happen overnight, but it is possible with God.
See, if you have children, expand on that idea of when the children break your trust. What are the steps that we take to reinstall or trigger that trust between parent and child?
I can give an example. Say your child has abused their computer time. Say they were supposed to be on only an hour a day, and you find out that they were on it 2 hours a day. Well, the natural consequence would be to take the computer away for a certain amount of time. And so obviously we're doing this in a very condensed fashion. There's a lot of conversation going on there. There's a lot of training going on in between. But I think a way to build back trust is when you finally give that computer to them. Okay, well, we're going to start off with only 30 minutes a day. And I'm not going to micromanage it, but we are going to keep track of it. And so that's giving them an opportunity to monitor themselves. Yes, we're watching, but not on top of them and over their shoulder. And then we get to see if they abused that new time or if they're trustworthy yet again. So that's just one example.
Steve, you mentioned last week about a concise workshop that your program was giving.
I think what you're probably referring to there, Pastor, is a project that we're working on that'll take a few months to come to completion. But it's basically our transformational workshop that we're known for, that we do in a 10-hour period of time over 2 days. It's taking those teaching segments, which there's 13 teaching segments, and we're going to do those as an online program, a master class, if you will. And so people will be able to register for that and have the content on their home computer, their mobile device, and they'll be able to have it on that device for a lifetime. So it's a lifetime membership type course.
Steve, how important is forgiveness? How important is forgiveness?
Huge, huge. God sent Jesus for us, for the forgiveness of our sins, along with some other things that he mandated in the Bible. But he commands us in Matthew 18 to forgive. And so I think, again, taking this full circle, when we look what's done to us, as awful as it is, it still fails compared to what we did
It's true.
to put Jesus on the cross.
Very
So
true.
it's that important.
Steve, how can people contact your program if they want to find out more about the classes or about information about forgiveness or the book? How can they do that?
The book you can find on Amazon. It's under my name, Steve Wormer. It's called Rivers of Hope. You can find more information about the program. I think this will all be in the notes too.
The description, yes.
It's hurt, the number 2, hope, hurttohope.org. And you can also email me at steve.wormer5@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Love to help in any way that I can.
Any last comments, Steve, before we go tonight?
I was just going to say one little nugget, and stop me if I go too long on it. What we often do in a forgiveness situation, like we've been talking about when people hurt us, but if we're being honest, we hurt people too.
That is true.
And what we tend to do is we go to them and we beg for their forgiveness. I want to implore all of us, starting with me, don't do that. And here's what you do instead. You give a very sincere, integrous, which is an apology with integrity, saying what you did and why you're sorry. Not if I did, but I did this. I'm so sorry. You know, what we want to say is, please forgive me on the heels of that. Don't do that, because they're already wrestling with God in what we did. Now, if you say, please forgive me, they may not be ready for that. So we've imposed another burden on them in their wrestling with God. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm following. I'm tracking.
Just apologize as sincerely as you can and as humble as you can. That'll actually make forgiving us easier.
And don't use the word if, right?
Never. Right. That's so right. Yes, sir.
Well, friends, it's good to have you here tonight. Steve, thanks so much. To our director, to our listeners. And again, next week, we're going to do a deep dive in Church of God Restoration. There was a book written by Harlan Sorrell, and he's doing a deep dive in comparing D.S. Warner's teaching to Restoration's teaching. I read the book last week. It's a pretty good read. So I'm going to interview him about the book and what we can learn to maintain unity within God's church. Steve, thank you again. You've been precious. To our director, thank you. Our listeners, have a good night. Glad you came tonight. Lord